Hi folks, well at LR Workshop. In this video I'm going to be converting my unholy mess of wiring that was the Td5 instrument gauge and warning light conversion to my 300 TDI. So this wiring here, this is what I'm going to be doing in the video so that it becomes a lot more plug and play to fit the Td5 instruments with the Td5 loom as standard by replacing and fitting the connector plugs that are standard on a Td5. In this video I'm going to be talking about the actual connectors, the terminals, the crimping methods, the wire choice, where you can source some of these wires, the gauge size, heat shrink, all that goodness, crimping, no soldering involved, no soldering involved. I've learnt my lesson with that mess. So stay tuned, that'll all be coming up in this video. I'll be using LR Workshop that has all of the connectors and the pin colours, the wire colours in the pins for the terminals as a reference for doing this conversion. I did this conversion a long time ago and I'm going to try to do it better and more permanently because quite frankly this is embarrassing. So what I've done recently is I've just replaced all of this dashboard basically. This is a dashboard now from a 2006 300 TDI Kalahari. I had to change the dashboard just for the provenance. Ooh. So anyway, in doing that I've now basically disrupted some wires and I don't have heated rear window or the LED flashing on the alarm. I've had some immobilizer problems as well, and oh, what's the other one? Glow plugs lights stopped working. So unfortunately now the dashboard is back together. I've decided I'm going to do something about this properly, and hopefully you may be able to learn something from what I did or shouldn't have done part of this process. I originally did this conversion on my 200 TDI, and God, that was 2009. I fitted the dashboard warning lights. You don't need the full dash, you can just fit the instrument binnacle, and that in itself is quite an upgrade. You get the more reliable speedo indicator and things like that. I mean, one reason why you wouldn't want to do this is the fuel gauge. The fuel gauge on the Td5 is not linear, so half tank is probably about here. This one stays on full. It goes above full and it only gets to full, it comes down to full about 140 miles in. Vertical is about 140 miles to go. Light comes on about 3/4 into the orange on yellow. And that is accurate on mine because I've got a plastic fuel tank. So this gauge is matched to the sender in the tank, but you fit it with the existing, like the metal tank, then you'll get a different set of readings. So that's just something to be aware of. It's not necessarily a better fuel gauge, but I'm a bit of a rest of the world's about ponce, so I wanted it for that reason. So I put this in my 200 TDI originally, and not knowing any better, I use these connector blocks, which are hideous. You'll see some of these now. Part of the reason why I want to change them is, so I can get this, you'll see some of these are melting. These have been in here 10 years. No fuses have overblown, but they're just melting. It's not, oh, it makes me quite sad, and makes me want to change these and try and do it a bit more properly. But essentially I put it in my 200 TDI. I knew not long after I bought my 200 TDI that I was going to buy a 300 TDI. So I wanted to take this conversion off and then put it on my 300 TDI when I bought that, which is what I did. So I kind of put it on temporarily. Unfortunately, the person who bought my 200 TDI would have had to deal with this kind of horrendous bird's nest with connector blocks having converted this over. Anyway, so I put this on the 300 TDI, and what I was trying to do was keep as many of the 300 TDI connectors as possible and tap into those. So I've kept, this is the LED alarm flasher, so I've spliced this part that went to the LED into, connected that to the Td5 loom and then spliced that into there. I've cut the original bulkhead into speedo plug on here, and then I cut the plug here, and I've kept it, thank God, off the Td5 instrument loom, which these things, the entire loom, they're on eBay for like 40 or 50 quid these days. I probably bought this for about a tenner. So I butchered this Td5 instrument loom to fit the 300 TDI. In hindsight, what I should have done was keep this connector on and then convert the 300 TDI bulkhead loom into, let's get the connector out, into Td5 bulkhead wiring using this one, which is the opposite to this plug here. So do it the other way around. So I could have kept this on the loom, that just and make the bulkhead loom plug and play. This was done as well before I fitted all of this dashboard and actually started hacking around the bulkhead loom. So I kind of wish I'd done that to begin with, actually. Problem was, bear in mind, I did this this was all the rage in 2009, 10, 11. This plug was not easily available. The one that would have been on the bulkhead to go into the loom, it's not as accessible. You can buy these on eBay now. Link is in the description if you want one. These connectors weren't as easy to come by on the internet. Bearing in mind, the internet was not what it is today in terms of things being accessible and being able to find stuff. So that's why I decided to go with this. And I always thought that I might want to, I like the idea of being able to bring this back to 300 TDI kind of spec if I needed to, as an option, bearing in mind, you know, less than a year before I'd done that and brought the 200 TDI back to a normal spec. So that was kind of still floating around my head. It's kind of funny I'm doing this now because I've got all the full, when I rebuild this Defender, X number of years in the future, I will be putting in a full rest of the world spec wiring loom. I won't need any of this. It'll all be plug and play. Why am I even bothering? I'm bothering because it just could be better. And I think it would make quite a good video. So hopefully some people might find it interesting or learn something about this. I don't know if this mod, how much this mod is done so much anymore recently, but maybe the Americans will love it because they're converting all their 200 TDIs to 300 TDIs. These days, maybe they might want to upgrade to the Td5s like we were doing in the UK about 10, 11 years ago. I'm not going to be precious about trying to keep, this is for the clock, I think, on a 300 TDI. As I said, speedo, and then the LED. I'm just going to butcher these and take them off. Then I think, actually, when I go to a rest of the world spec loom in the future, this loom will actually have some value. I could take this loom off, sell it, and it will be plug and play 300 TDI for the Td5 dashboard, if anyone would like to purchase that in the future. I'm going to try and collect up all the wires and use the actual bulkhead plug. Put that into the bulkhead, like that. I've got some extra connectors that go in these warning light plugs. So I'm going to replace these sections with longer sections. I've got all the wires that I bought originally, the whole rainbow of Land Rover colours, which I've had, and this was a great asset. If you ever end up doing wiring on a Defender, just buy every frigging colour in like a 2 metre length. It's brilliant. I'm so glad I did that. I'm also going to splice this back onto the Td5 loom, the instrument loom, somewhere in here as well. And for joining the wires, what I've done before in here is soldering them. This is a real pain soldering in here. The access is so blooming limited. It's not really an option to take the bulkhead loom out because the 300 TDI, it goes into the wings and it's all, you know, part of that. So I've got these kind of like terminals, but they're terminals for jointing. I'm happy with a crimp. I want something more permanent than using bullet connectors or this kind of stuff. Anything that could come apart, I want to do it a bit more permanently. And you know, the old crimp versus solder debate, I think crimping will be perfectly fine. And I'm going to heat shrink over the top of them for connecting basically these new tails into these existing cut off bits of wire. Now that the instrument harness is out, it's a bit easier to explain what's going on, and it's actually quite straightforward really. Essentially, you can mostly wire up the same wires to the matching ones on the 300 TDI through the plug. Essentially, then what you've also got to do is then find two permanent feeds, which is this blue-brown and the purple-brown, and here. So you've got essentially got these two purple feeds. So these are the extra kind of wires outside of this plug. Are these two. Now I've fused these. I've since kind of looked, and they come from the same wire tap on the Td5, which is after the 5 amp fuse. So I think you could probably combine these going into the plug on the other side rather than having two of these. That should probably be fine. They're quite beefy wires, but in the wiring diagram they don't say they're as beefy, so that should be okay. The other thing to note is that the heated rear window, the white black wire in here, that comes through this plug and then goes off on a separate loom on the 300 TDI. So I've had to take this off here and come off, and then that goes to the warning lights separately. Naturally, you can see I'm trying to be quite organized here. So on this one, actually, I can just remove this, put that take that straight from the loom into the warning plugs. So that's on here. That's That's this one here. I could just take that directly from there. You also see, maybe, this is the plug for the main instrument harness. This is the same connector as the Td5 hazard light as well, just for reference. It's a kind of a generic rover part on there. So that will cut out that bit of oddity. So we need to find the two permanent fuses, permanent lives coming in, and that should be fused 5 amp. We've got the heated rear window feed comes in. We've got to take the low fuel light out because the low fuel light is driven. The low fuel comes here, it goes up into the speedo, and then the low fuel light comes out from the speedo on this kind of setup. And then the other thing to note is that there's no speedo signal on a 300 TDI. So this is a separate wire that I've had to wire in with a transducer. So that's not part of this plug. So that at the moment is a separate one. I'll have to put in the wiring loom. That's down in here. That's this set of wiring which goes off to the transfer box. You've got a ignition live going in, an earth, and then you've got this speedo signal wire coming back, which then I'll have to put into the equivalent bulkhead connector on here. Oh, and the LED alarm comes in on this this loom here. This is just go to a normal LED bulb, but I've spliced it in on the white on the pink wire there. Also as well, the Td5 has a yellow pink wire, which is for the alarm that goes to the ECU, but that's not required on a 300 TDI. The other point to note is that on this the Td5, the temperature gauge is driven by the ECU. So the wire comes in from the ECU, comes straight to the gauge. On a 300 TDI, you have to take the sender wire. It comes from the speedo, which is then translated somewhat, and then it goes to the gauge on here. That's how it gets the signal. There's a kind of a resistor in here. So essentially, this wire from the gauge came from the plug. So you take it off, and then you route it back up here to the speedo, and it comes in this socket, this connector point here, this pin number here. Then you take another cable out here, which then comes back to where the connector, where the signal comes in. So essentially the signal comes in, goes to the speedo, and then back to the gauge, as opposed to coming straight in to the gauge here. I can illustrate that for you. On this is a rest of the world split 300 TDI wiring loom, which I managed to prize out of a scrapyard in Africa. Why am I not just fitting this one instead of that one? Because it's got the plug on it already. This needs a bit of rehabilitation, but I'd like to get that one up working with the vehicle anyway. It's got a few extra wires in that I'm using for like my turbo gauge and stuff. This will need a bit of rehabilitation. You can see the plug's a bit mashed on there and stuff. And there's no loom tape left on here either, but you can see the plug. This is the genuine 300 TDI version. So you can see you've got a whole bunch of greens going in and out there across the 5 wires on that one side. That's essentially how that works. Interesting enough, they've got the yellow pink wire on the 300 TDI, which does come into this socket, but then I think there's no equivalent wire on the other side, whereas on mine I've just terminated it like that. If you can find one of these, wow, that'll make the whole conversion, well, not a whole lot easier, a bit easier. You won't have to rewire the gauge along here like I did, but these are pretty expensive, and if you're going to buy one second hand, then good luck, because I've probably seen 2 for sale in the last 10 years on eBay. Now with a lot of these connectors, it really comes down to the tools you've got. Now I've started this 20-way warning light connector, the one I was extending the tails on, and I pulled out all this horrendous tale of woe with all these connectors I'd had in before that were attached to the Scotch blocks. And what I did all those years ago, because I didn't know any better, is I sort of crimped these up and soldered them in because they weren't properly holding. I couldn't work out. I sort of flapped these over, and I used a pair of needle nose pliers to kind of squeeze them in. I didn't know any better. The problem that caused was that when these were in here, there's a tang in here that holds them in, that goes into here. But this is now full of solder, so they wouldn't be held in properly. Or maybe it was on this side. Yeah, in there. They weren't being held in properly. Now there is an extra clip here, but it's just naff. Anyway, so I had a go at this using my crimp tools, okay, with these wires I had, which were 1 millimeter square. But anyway, these are pulling out anyway. This is what I've attempted to do with the terminals in my first attempt. Now I was using this crimping tool. Okay, so I'd upgraded for these based on when I did the wiring originally. I'd bought these in the meantime and I was like, yes, I've got the right tools. Now these tools come in a whole range of different varieties. Okay, now this is Vehicle Wiring Products, no association, but it's just a good description. This is their catalogue. This is basically this tool here. Okay, the one I bought for non-insulated terminals. A lot of the time when you buy wiring stuff, you will end up with these style, which is the cheapest of the cheap, and you end up with this like blue, red and yellow crimping tool, and that's for these pre-insulated terminals, which is just everywhere. If you're just trying to find electrical components, you just end up with these because they've flooded the market completely, the DIY market. Anyway, so I bought these, and they're not appropriate because, let's get this back, when I'm trying to crimp this up, I now know that this outer crimping bit has to go over the rubber, and then this crimps on the wire in here. Now what I was doing was trying to use these, and you're supposed to crimp the bit on the wire first, but this is too wide. It would start damaging the connector to try and fit it in there, because this is quite wide and it's only got one kind of setting. The idea is you put it there and it kind of curls, you put it in there and you crimp down and it curls it over, a bit like the Mobot. And it just wasn't working. It wasn't working correctly, really. As you can see there, I was trying to push these over with the needle nose pliers as well. Just horrible. And then I've been putting them into the connector, and they've just been going in and then popping out and not really latching appropriately. And also we've got the wires are not fitting in correctly. Really what I was trying to do is fit my materials to the product. So I've started again. Essentially, these are all the colourful cables I had many years ago from Vehicle Wiring Products that are 1 millimeter squared. The factory setup actually has 0.5 millimeter squared, and these terminals are designed for 0.5 millimeter squared area cables. I'll just go and show you the rest of the world's better wiring loom right now so you can see how these are supposed to look. And this is what you'd be expecting to see, just these 3 plugs. So here we go back into the instrument harness, and then the 2 warning plugs on here, and you can see that the gauge of wire on these is quite thin, and that's really what I'm attempting to go for. See how clean that is on the factory setup. That would only be a dream. But anyway, I'm going to try and get somewhat close to this plug and play scenario. So anyway, for this job now, I have now bought all of the wiring colours in 0.5 millimeter. You can see how thin that wire is. You see how thin that is? And that's what's designed to fit with these connectors, this part of the dashboard. Vehicle Wiring Products only do the colours down to 1 millimeter squared, which is the problem I had and why I bought these all many years ago at this size. I didn't know any better. But actually I found a website called ALM Supplies, no connection, but they will supply this in 0.5 millimeter squared in all the colours of the rainbow, about 20p a metre. So all of this, I've bought pretty much 30 different types of wires here, about £11 including postage. Incredible value. It's just not worth going in a different way. The other thing I've invested in is a new set of crimping tools. I'll just say, it's suffice to say, like I've had cable strippers, get these things. These things are great. They're just great for an accurate wire stripping. I used to use cable cutting pliers, but definitely get yourself some of those. So I've upgraded to this one, listed with Vehicle Wiring Products. This one talks about Japanese connectors. There is no one crimp tool that works with every type of terminal. I think that's just a reality. But you get these ones that work probably in most situations. The genuine ones for these, so if we're looking at this type of connector, this is a TE connectivity multi-lock connector, and these terminals, the proper crimp tool for this is about £800. This one, including postage and VAT, was 40. And the difference between this one and this one is that this one's just one constant, you know, kind of size all the way through. This one has got the two ridges in there. So it's designed so it does the crimp on the cable and the crimp on the sheath. So the crimp on the copper and the crimp on the sheath at the same time in one motion. And they're a bit more suited to these kind of terminals as well, because these are metric, whereas this one talks about American wire gauge, which is always a bit of a pain to convert. You never quite know that you're working with the correct things, but it's nice to see these in metric. So I'm going to give these a go and see what a crimp looks like using these. So we probably want about 6mm poking out the end. That's really balanced because we want to get this far enough in so that we can crimp on the copper, but not too far that it starts impacting on this bit, but then also with enough sheath in so that's going to crimp over like that. So that's about how much we want. I think we don't want to twist these wires. Not naturally I would want to twist these wires up to stop them fraying out, but I think we don't want that because we want the bits of the crimp to come over and to grip into the strands of wire like that. And if it's twisted, it's not going to be able to clamp in. So we can make sure these are straight. Alright, what I found with the trick in here is because these have got the notch for the different wings of the terminal, so I'm going to put this up in here and get it to pull against that lip there. So then there's a gap on this side, so we can crimp both. Ideally we bring it back a little bit, so that's not hanging off the edge. Bring it back there a little bit. So you've got to get the thing lined up quite nicely to get a good crimp. Also what I've found is you want to get this square on to the bottom, because it's possible sometimes for this to be slightly twisted in there. You want to get it as square as possible on the bottom. This is the benefit of having the ratchet. You can twist it a bit. There we go. There we go. What do you think of that? I'm quite happy with that actually. Quite happy with it. Give it a tug test. Yeah, I mean that's more force than I'm going to put on it. There we go, that's pretty cool. Right, now I've got to do it with a whole load of probably 17 other wires as well. Clamp, let go. Okay, so that one has gone a bit wrong because I fed it too far in. So maybe a bit of trial and error. Here's one I did earlier. This black and red, that one crimped pretty good, if I'm honest. So I'm going to do this one again because I'm not happy with that. It does pay to get yourself some spares. I've got a whole load here. In terms of getting these terminals out, so in my case I've already fitted some, so I want to take these out. Lever up this retainer here, like that, and get your old terminal. You can get these relatively cheaply on eBay. There's lots of different varieties, but essentially you want one relatively small and thin looking. Now what these do, put it in from behind and push it down here as far as and hard as you can push it. There we go. So that's in there. And then pull the terminal out. Now this is the satisfying bit, putting them all back in. Got the orange wire for the alarm. That one goes into 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
push till it clicks. Give it a wiggle, doesn't come out. Great. Okay, all done. Clip, click, click. You can go and look on LR Workshop at this connector. This is connector C0233. We've still got the white orange wire to go in for the low fuel light, because that's wired into the other part of the harness at the moment to come into here. But essentially these are the wires. So we have number 1 to number 10, number 11 to number 20. The only one that's missing otherwise is the red slate one here, the red grey. That is for Td5s, and I believe it's the engine management light. Now I managed to get all of the pins out of this plug, and it took me about an hour actually. It was a little bit tricky. This is for the end of the harness. First of all, you need to clip these out. You just got to push these bits up and remove this entirely. And then in here, you see there's these little pins, or kind of latching tabs on the outer edge. You've got to get something in there. Now I use this, just a small screwdriver, quite a thin end. And you're going to slide it pretty much exactly in the right slot, in the right bit. So just above this bit, and then just below that bit, there's a bit of a groove in there. You've got to hit it exactly. And then instead of levering up to get it up, I found that you have to push it up like that. So it's a bit of a tricky motion, but fundamentally, once it's detached, these will just pull out very easily once it's there. But you've got to kind of push in, up, to get it to latch. I tried a number of different things. I tried safety pins. I tried some of these pointy bits on here, and they're not quite strong enough. I went with the screwdriver originally. It wasn't really working. I've mashed up a few inside of here. Yeah, that one was a bit mashed up. This one's quite mashed up. And I thought for a second I wasn't going to be able to do it because I was just struggling. And it worked in the end. So I got them all out. So these terminals are Sumitomo 0900 male terminals. And for the wires on these I'm going to be fitting 0.5, 1 and 1.5 to keep the factory diameter of wiring. So there's a few, so I'll be doing different crimping methods depending on the size of the wire. In terms of getting the wire length correct, I've just been getting it about 6mm and then measuring up. So here I know that the sheath has to go about there, but not that far. So about there, and then I can see that's the optimum place for it, and then I can see where the copper is. So I can kind of mentally picture where the copper sticks out the other side, and that's how far, that's when I know how the cable is in far enough. So I measure that up because these crimpers completely cover the terminal when you're doing it. What I've done as the first stage is just pre-crimp slightly over using the bigger setting on here on this other set of pliers. So kind of finding that having a different set of pliers as well gives a bit of value in this situation. So that, because sometimes you find this doesn't crimp correctly, because this is a smaller wire, and it does get, these terminals do go down to this gauge of wire, but just gives it a head start. Sometimes you find they don't go evenly, and this has a habit of twisting. So I'll start with this one off on the bigger crimp, the pre-crimped, and the bigger crimp because they're bigger terminals. So you know wire in there. So then now I know with this one I need it about halfway between the crimp and the terminal. That's happened again. See, it's twisted. That's quite common to happen with these. But we've at least started getting both wings coming down, because what you can happen is both wings overlap and then flap down. So after all that messing about, this is probably my best crimp for this connector. And what I basically worked through was progressively coming down, because the profile on this one, it's got a sharper bit in the middle, therefore it's going to plunge the centre down more compared to this one. So what I progressively did on these is go from one to the next one to make sure that they come over, and then use this one, go to the middle, and then come to the last one. There's a bit of a tendency for these to want to twist, so just making sure when I'm doing these crimps on this one, hold it in position, twist it a bit, twist it so that it's in the right place, just to make sure that it's all square in there before I do the final crimp. And that seems to have worked out. Naturally, I think that's what you pay for with the genuine crimping tools, is they will hold this thing exactly square as you would need it to be to get the perfect crimp, because this bottom bit's rounded, this section here is rounded, so it tends to want to wander in the crimps. Okay, I've got them all done. These are all the cables required for fitting into this plug, and now I've just got to get the order correct. Luckily, I've got this rest of the world's perk actual loom here, so I can just match the colours up. So I've done the first row already. Next we need slate black. It's a satisfying click, that is. Then we need green blue. Measure once, cut twice. Yep. Good. Where's that black red one gone? Found it. Just to confirm, black red goes to the right of the brown blue, in between the black there. Click. Good. Done. Just close these now, thread them in, snap them down. So now I've got all these tails, so I've got this wired up correctly, and now I need to then connect up to the rest of this wiring here and basically undo the cutting I did over a decade ago to bring this back to standard. I have finished connecting the instrument harness back together, and I've given myself a bit of extra length on the cables. It would probably naturally be about here, but essentially use these crimps and they've done well. I think they're all crimped up, and then I've covered over with heat shrink, which I still need to finally shrink down on these individual wires. So to prevent them all going at once, I'm just going to stick this padded envelope in, find about where it's supposed to go. Babyliss Elegance, full power. Shrunk down nicely, protected, ain't going to go anywhere. Let's do the rest of them. Finished. Look, man repair loom. Man make loom good, big man. So I've just taken this main harness to instrument harness on the 300 TDI off, and you get these off by a pin in the front and just lever it down, and then lever the latch down from the front and pull the pin out from the back. What's been amazing though is the terminals are the same as the new connector. This is the new connector for the Td5 female that I want to put on here. This is the male Td5 pins, and then this is the male Td5 connected into the existing one on the 300 TDI. And those connectors are identical, this one and this one. They're identical, so that's great. I don't have to actually swap these pins over at all. So that's done five of them without having to worry. So easily enough, I've moved everything from this old 300 TDI connector, started moving them over
Terminals are the same, they just slot in. That's brilliant. So to summarize, these are 5 of the 6 that went into this connector. They just moved straight over. The 6th one is this white black for the heated screen light, which you take out of here, and that's now going to go to the 20-way warning light over here. So we've got 5 wires on here. On the 300 TDI, we've got on the other side, on the instrument loom, we've got 13 wires, but we only use 10 because the pink yellow one doesn't go to the ECU from this side. So we've got 5 here. 6 and 7 are a permanent feed and the LED flash earth, which came off on their own connector here. Also what we had for the clock here, the permanent feed and an earth. That's 8 and 9. 10 is the speedo signal, which we've had to wire in this. The 300 TDI hasn't got that. Wire number 11 will be the white orange that comes out of here and goes around this way for the low fuel light. And then wire number 12 will be another earth that we have to wire up into here on the slate black that comes out this side. And just so it might happen, turns out that the clock connector also has the same terminals, which will fit directly into this one. What a turn up for the books. This is amazing. I wish I'd known this 10 years ago. I feel that I'm now at the final stages. I've got this connector wired up. I've just got some earths to fix up here. I've got these to extend and to wire into this loom. I've got to figure out how far I want to go, joint them together, and same, put a pin on this one, joint that into this connector here. At this point, it's relevant to test the fact that this, when it all goes back together, this is probably going to be sat right down in here, and then these are going to be up over here. So that kind of dictates how. So this one, for example, the low fuel light needs to be able, instead of just wiring up here to here, this needs to go down in there and then up around. So that's important to think about for the length there, as well as these earths. If I'm going to join these earths together, one's going to be up here, one's going to be up here in the warning light. There's all the earths wired up. So I've got 5 earths, one down here from the speedo transducer, got one at the back for my low coolant sensor. I've got the main earth coming in, I've got the one going off into here on this grey black wire, and then I've got the one that needs to go into this terminal here, which is off on this set of wiring at the moment. I'm going to connect up in a second. I'm just going to heat shrink this all together because they're all coming out in different directions. I thought I'd just terminate them all together. I'll put some sheathing over this, and then I can just stuff that down in the corner and not worry about it. And I've got a lot of extra space here. Right, so let's engage the Babyliss Elegance. And there we have it. I'll just tuck that down in there and bring this one, and I've got this, I can bring this one in and out independently by adjusting the length of this wire into here. It's the final countdown. So I've already terminated a lot of these ones coming from the main loom with the connectors all pre-crimped them, ready to go. Now what I've got to do is decide how long I want these wires to be on here, and this one as well. This one from the low fuel light in here. How long I want them to be to come around here, and then crimp them on, get a terminal on that, stuff it into there. And literally that is I think the end of it at that stage. And I've got to remember to put heat shrink wiring on these before I crimp them, because that's always a easy mistake to make. I've elected to keep this joint here because this is joining two wires into one, so it makes sense to keep it. And with the shortest one first, which is the orange. It's the shortest one, so it's going to be the longest. What I'm thinking is I want it to come out to probably about here when I pull the dash out, route it behind there, and then when it's in, it's going to sit about there. So I think that is probably enough. Yeah, that'll be good. So So I've trimmed everything off to the length of the orange one. The connector goes this way round, this facing this way. That's all going to sit behind there, like that. So you should be able to bring it out. It's going to sit there. And these are going to get attached. I'll do the white-orange one at the end. And we're going to sit around about there. And then pull out to there. And then sit like that. So there's a decent amount of space back there. It can be quite hard sometimes to find a heat shrink that's perfect fit for the wire you've got. So what I tend to do is, after it's just been hot, burn your fingers and just give the heat shrink a bit of a twist, and it will stay that, and that makes sure that it all definitely won't kind of slide off or you know, find its way off, work loose in the end. As you can see there's a little bit of play on the end, but that should hold it all tight, and now it's gone solid. Well, finally, this is all sorted. The last thing to do, the actual last ever thing to do, is to route the white-orange round into this plug. So I've just given it enough slack that it will come through on this. And then we're going to put this terminal into position 3 on here. Click. Done. Done. There is the final wiring. Well, I need to tidy it up and clamp it down a bit and what have you. Essentially what I went through this is that I split the top and the bottom rows of this connector into clumps, and then I made sure that, you know, because this has got to go like that, I made sure that at least the outer radius wires had a bit more, you know, length on them than the inner radius, so that it was going to actually bend properly. These are all now heat shrunk up. I've got to clip that. I'm going to start clamping these together, clamp that in there, clamp these together, that goes there, and then this will sit like that, that'll sit like that. Very good. Some points of note then, just on the colours, because there's a few differences. I'll just point out the differences between the 300 TDI and the TD5. On the 300 TDI, ignition is mostly white or solid white or solid green, like these ones here. These are like this kind of greeny colour here. And this goes to white green on the TD5. Then we've got, from the 300 TDI, we've got yellow brown, and that goes to brown yellow, and that is the battery charge light. We've also got red orange, which basically means side light illumination, and on this here it goes to red black. Usually as well on the TD5 it goes red orange, like this one for the illumination. Just on this plug though, it goes red, it goes into red black. So we've got a red orange into a red black there. And the final one is this. It's glow plugs. On the 300 TDI it's yellow black, and on the TD5 it's black yellow. So those are the differences basically in the colours, how you connect these together from the original loom into this new connector here. I think what it's worth now doing is a test, don't you think? It's all plugged back together. The electric's on. One of the great benefits about this now is that I can actually detach the instrument binnacle without having to undo every single plug, because it's actually removable, which is great. So I was able to put that back onto this before I could bolt it in. Anyway, before I connect it all up. Anyway, let's go. Good, they're all working. Oh, diff lock. Can't do that while it's sat there. That's very good. The only other one is low fuel light. I've noticed that my low coolant does its flicker when it comes on at the beginning. Yeah, low fuel. I'm going to have to wait till I've got low fuel before I can test that one, but I have no reason to believe that it's not going to work. Right, I think last thing, good that it all works now. Got to tidy up the loom, and then we're done. Cable tying is up. So this is about where the factory loom would be cable tied, about here. And then I've gone with two, I'm going to do these in the two clumps to the front and the back, just so they've got a bit of extra, they can just sort of take some different routes if they want to. And then I'll just cable tie these over around where the joints are, because this is the most inflexible part, so I might as well connect them where they are the most inflexible. Ta-da! There we have it, folks. 11 days of lunchtimes and evenings, and I'm essentially back where I started, but this is so much more satisfying. Look at this loom. It looks some way like a Td5 loom now, the way it's laid out. This is, oh man. So this is now the ugly duckling of the entire loom, but it works. It's not necessarily a problem. I'll probably do something with that again in the future. And then just to point out this connector here, this is ignition live to the speedo transducer, which would normally go from the engine loom or the bulkhead loom, go from the bulkhead loom down under where the transfer box is. So that's just another one that I've had to route round. I'll leave this on here at the moment because that's not a problem either. And then also I've got this other bit of wiring in here that's just unique to mine, which is the low coolant alarm, which I've done a video about. You can go and find that video if you're interested about the low coolant alarm setup. That's just wired into other ignition lives and earth. So there's a bit down the back there, you'll see one of those horrible connectors, but similarly the whole rest of the vehicle is kind of working at the moment. Everything seems to work, which is good. If you enjoyed this glorious 12-volt goodness, then please give me a thumbs up on this video and subscribe if you are interested in anything related to defenders and messing around with this kind of stuff. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.